You go first.
I'm Orbert Davis. I am the artistic director, co-founder of Chicago Jazz Philharmonic.
And I'm Mark Ingram, producing director, co-founder of Chicago Jazz Philharmonic. I'll never forget, remember we took those pictures?
Oh yeah, with the fros. My fro looked good then too, by the way.
Yeah, we kind of got him in there. Yeah, he wasn't going to be in this band with some coveralls
Oh,
and
I
plaid
knew that.
shirts.
I knew that. 2 years after we met, I was destined to go to DePaul University. I already knew that, and to go to music school. And while I was in music school, Mark decided to move to Chicago around the same time, and he got a promotion at his job that took you to Chicago.
To Chicago.
And so we decided to put a different band together, another band. So
Well, the reason why I decided to move to Chicago is because I was driving to Chicago. How many times a week
for the
did we
band,
rehearse?
3 days a week.
3 days a week from Kankakee. And we were rehearsing at night, and it was just got to be dangerous, falling asleep and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So I said, I need to get to Chicago. And plus, all the band was going to DePaul University.
Some of them,
was
yeah.
at DePaul University. So I'm the only outsider. So we went.
Yeah.
And so I transferred up here, and we had our band in Chicago.
Yeah, it was a good band.
Yeah.
So the band lasted about 14 years or so, and then we got into songwriting, producing. We generally didn't turn work down. So if a work comes, we'd say, okay, we can do that. Let's do it. And every job became an opportunity, particularly one in the recording world. So then Mark got a job years later. I was working as a studio trumpet player. Mark got a job as the A&R for Copia Records.
Well, him being a studio trumpet player kind of opened up that door because Orbert was, got to be almost a first call trumpet player for all the production houses in Chicago, doing commercials for United Airlines, you name it, every McDonald's, you name it. And so I got to know these people as well. And then one of those producers who owned a production house, Butch Stewart, started his own record label. And he was looking for an A&R person for his record label. And of course, we had developed a good relationship. And I said, I could do that job. Now, did I know I could do that job? No. But I took it on, and I said that the only way I would do this job is Orbert Davis is the first artist that's released on the label.
Right. Yeah.
And that was his introduction to the jazz world, really.
Somewhat,
with that first CD. I mean, the world,
to the national, at a national level.
National level.
Yeah. And even before that, we won a major competition with our band, Grand Staff, and we chose Butch to be our producer of that.
Yeah.
And the song actually made it in a John Travolta movie. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. Yes. Around that time, I started venturing into serious composition, and not just songs, but orchestral works, jazz pieces. And I wrote a couple pieces for Paul Freeman of Chicago Sinfonietta. And they were great, I thought. So we got a call from Lauren Deutsch, the former executive director of the Jazz Institute of Chicago, who said, Orbert, we know we owe you a favor because you've been doing favors for us. We want you to play the festival, and we need you to think big.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had just come off this successful production with Chicago Sinfonietta. I said, well, I'm thinking big, Symphonic Jazz Orchestra. And I think she fainted. She said, there's no way we will ever
be able to pay for that.
Pay for it, yeah. So I was also part of an organization called the National Jazz Museum on the board. And we had just met with Boeing, who had moved to Chicago. And so one of the agents there was just so cool, Jim Newcomb, and called him up and said, Jim, what do you think about this project, Jazz Orchestra for the Jazz Fest? He said, we could do that. We could help with that. And we put the musicians together, and it became Chicago Jazz Philharmonic.
And of course, that opening night, was it the opening night? I think it was.
It was a Saturday.
It was a Saturday night at the Jazz Fest.
Yeah, it was the main night,
Main night on the Petrillo stage. And of course, I'm on pins and needles because this is a orchestra of predominantly classical musicians.
Yeah, 55.
And at the Jazz Fest. And I'm like, how is this going to be received? So I'm standing in the back, and as Orbit they started playing, I'm looking at people. And you had people like,
because you got to start classical. You can't hit up with the jazz right away.
He started classical, and these people, they playing like no smiles or nothing, folding their arms, you know, and like looking at each other like, what is
What
this
is
mess?
this?
You know, and then it started swinging, and the rest was history.
Yeah, yeah, that was a great night.
Yeah.
So the years that I worked as a trumpet player and as a professional musician, I was a classical trumpet player and a jazz trumpet player, and especially in the recording studios, those two things were not foreign or different to me. You know, when someone called, you know, because again, I guess we could talk about business here. Marketing is important, and so I want, if someone needs a trumpet, I want them to call me. So, what style do you play? Yes, all of them. So I developed a reputation of being the, you know, one of the people to call whatever anyone needs. But as I grew as a musician and especially as a composer, I found that I was also gravitated to writing classical music, you know, at the same time. And I always made a point that whatever session that I was on, I wasn't just concerned about doing my part, doing my job. I did that, but I was always listening to the other musicians around me. And I just gravitated toward writing for orchestra. So that's a concept called third stream, the blending of classical music and jazz. Did I invent it? Did we invent it? No. No, it's been around for years. Gunther Schuller in the late 1950s coined the term as the midway place where jazz meets classical. Gunther was a prodigy at the age of 16, I believe. He played French horn with the New York Metropolitan Orchestra, like 16 years old. But he's also the quintessential conductor. So just the fact that, you know, he laid that groundwork, and I was a fan of his music. I also worked with William Russo, who was a third string composer and the first teacher and head of the department at Columbia College. So working with him, I got into the mindset of third string, classical and jazz, and the fact that they can live in one person, which is different. It's a different concept than most schools teach, particularly colleges. You have a jazz program over here, you have classical programs over here, and it's a choice. Very rarely is it a choice to play both. But again, that came from the recording studio mentality. But years of working with Bill and finally meeting Gunther, I knew. And it didn't take long to convince Mark that this was the way to go. I mean, we could have done jazz. I like to be different anyway. There are a gazillion jazz trumpet players out there, but there's only one who's crazy enough to start a third stream orchestra.
And it was easier for me. Well, I won't say so easy. Initially it was, but it was easier for me because I had given up my career as a singer and trombone player. And people ask me even today, it's like, why did you give that up? Why did you give it up? I have always been more interested in the production and the business and the management side of the industry.
Thank God.
You know, and even as a because I was a front singer in our band. I was the lead singer in our band, but I was always in the manager's face and I always wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes. I always wanted to know what was going on with sound and lighting and stuff like that. And
it's not, when I said thank God, I mean, as far as for me and for the organization, you know, he was a good singer and still is a good singer.
I'm okay.
I don't want that to come out the same way. Oh God, thank God you stopped singing.
When I got called to do the A&R for Copia Records and said Orbert has to be the first artist, you know, that kind of opened the doors for me doing more production because we together we produced all of his projects.
Yeah.
But then live production, I was really more interested in. And I got this call from a promoter who I had gotten to know over the years, the promoter who worked with Anheuser-Busch to create the whole Anheuser-Busch concert series and everything. And he asked me if I would be interested in shadowing, or which was being the runner for his producer in Chicago, who was doing, you know, big corporate shows in Chicago. So I said yes, I would. I didn't know what a runner was at the time, but it was like run get this, run get that, run get this, run get that. I did that for 5 years. For twice a year for this guy for 5 years, and then I got a call from him saying, "You think you can do the job that you were running for?" This guy's name was John. You were running for John. I said, "Yes, I could do that job." Now I say yes to everything when it comes to that, and I was terrified that he was going to let me do that job, and I did it for 15 years after that, and I produced shows all over the country for him. Production. That's how I got my chops as a doing shows and stuff like that. So it
yeah,
it paid off.
balance. Yeah, but
It was a
I
good
think
balance.
our careers definitely balance each other. I mean, because even for Mark to state to Butch that I would be the first artist, it was the purpose was for us to still be in proximity as we're working on our projects.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that way because if he's working on the north side, I'm working south side, we still had our Orbert production projects that we worked on. Lots of
And that was
arranging.
arrangement too with Joy
Yeah.
Art Music and
Oh yeah.
Copia. That we had to have that arrangement that we
Yeah.
could still do our own projects.
Yeah. And then Butch took me on as a ghostwriter, which was perfect too, because he had a very large studio, so he gave me a room, and I was able to, to compose, in that room. Ironically, while I was getting my master's degree at Northwestern, so just drive to Evanston, stay there, 12, 24 hours, and just write commercials all day long.
Yeah, and this was all prior to Chicago Jazz Philharmonic.
Yeah,
but it was all preparing us to do Chicago Jazz.
That's the thing. There's no way that we could even conceive a Chicago Jazz Philharmonic if it weren't for those years of doing that, specifically that work. Yes. And on Mark's side, and then on my side too, because a typical day at Joy Art was, hey, there's a McDonald's commercial coming in the style of the Batman movie. We need it by 5 o'clock today. Got you. Write it. Get the musicians. Play it all day long. And other project.
Daddy's Pleasure Sauce.
Oh yeah,
remember that? Yeah. On Sesame Seed Bun. Orbert did the music to that.
Yeah. So we were doing national TV spots, and the great thing about it was, as a ghostwriter, it only took me 5-10 minutes to compose. Do the chords, hit the piano, write it out, give it to Butch. He would do the producing, and I would simply get paid as a ghostwriter. But we did hundreds of those, and other projects too. We got a call from we were referred to produce a actress vocalist from Russia. Yeah, we could do that. But the cool thing is that we had other.
Speak any English.
She didn't speak English. We had other writers on the team, and so everyone were songwriters. So when anyone had a project, hey, I got this project. You want to write a couple of songs for me? Oh, sure. We did that with Jim Tulio.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So again, about what is the training for starting a third stream orchestra? And there's no program in the world. It was just being in those moments for years and years and years, talking 20, 30 years of constantly producing, doing it. Yeah.
Doing it.
And that was just simply to make a living at that time. But it was, what a great living though.
Well, I left my good paying full
corporate
job with AT&T to take that Copia Records A&R job for half the money I was making.
But you got to sing with Oprah and Patti LaBelle.
And my dad thought I lost my cotton picking mind. He said, you have lost your cotton picking mind. But I was single, no wife, no children, so I could take those kind of risks. But yeah, the door that opened up from that, and
I think the boldness of taking risks.
Yeah.
Because even before we started CJP and Music Alive, there was My Tech graphics.
That was me saying yes to something I'd not had a clue that I.
No. Mark actually is a phenomenal graphic designer. So I had nothing to do with that company except for just advice, I guess.
I had gotten this has nothing to do with it, but I had gotten a call from the Archdiocese of Chicago, and they wanted to. CD-ROMs had kind of first just
what?
Yeah, like that's what I said. They want to save the trees, and start using less paper. So they want to put all their tons of stuff on a CD-ROM. Okay. Now this wasn't just they wanted to just store all this stuff on the CD-ROM. They wanted an interactive CD-ROM,
right?
Where you put it on your computer and it comes up the screen, all full color stuff with menus and stuff like that. You push a button to get what you're looking for and can print it out or download it to your. And they said, "Can you do that?" I said, "Of course."
It sounds so easy now, but interactive. That's right.
I said, "Of course I can do that." $90,000 project.
Right.
That was our seed money.
Right. You need, and back then it was tough because it wasn't even on the internet yet. It was basically going to libraries and reading books. It makes it easy to conceive starting something as grandiose as Chicago Jazz Philharmonic, because it's basically doing the work, doing the research, and then producing it, writing the music, and there's managing. I mean, managing people is a whole other thing. Contracting people, but we had years of contracting musicians for the recording.
So that's for
and
the recordings. We started doing the contract.
And the first concert was mostly people who we hired on to do jingles. So they were like, "Oh yeah, Orbert, yeah, you got this project. Sure, call me in."